hip pain originating from your hip or your back and the differentiating signs between these two. Now, for executive moms who are managing the daily grind of professional duties and parenting, and hip pain can be an unwelcome distraction that affects both your work efficiency and your family life or your mommy duties. So, understanding the source of your hip pain, whether it is originating from the hip joint itself or is it originating from your spine, that is crucial because that will help you to manage your pain because you would know what exactly do you need to address. Do you need to work on your spine? Do you need to work on your hip joint? Do you need to work on both of them? So where is the pain coming from and how can you which one of them should you be managing? Now, of course, you want to target your attention or your focus or your pain management strategies in the right area where your pain is originating. Now, for those of you who don't know me, let me just introduce myself briefly. My name is Swati. I'm an executive mom power coach. I help moms of younger kids who work in high stress executive jobs. I help them to manage their spinal, that is back and neck and nerve pain. I also talk about joint pain, some tips and tricks that help me in my pain journey, some simple exercises, some lifestyle modifications. Basically, I do all of this without taking away a big chunk of your time because, hey, we are moms, we're busy people, right? All right, let's get back into the topic for today, which is your hip pain originating from your hip or your back and the differentiating signs? So I'm going to talk about, well, there are a couple of them, but in this video, I'm going to talk about three signs that you can think about or consider, and that'll give you a clue of whether your pain is the pain in your hip is because of some issues in your spine or some issues that are in the hip joint locally. Of course, go to your doctor, have yourself checked out. That is never ruled out, but this is just something you can do while you're waiting or while you're just thinking, lying awake in the bed and thinking, hey, what's happening? Is this a new problem? Is it just my hip? Is it just my spine? Is it both? All right. So, as you might have guessed by now, the hip and lower back issues or your spine issues can overlap, right? And it sometimes makes it difficult to pinpoint where exactly the problem lies because of this overlap. So let's look at the very first indicator that will tell you whether your pain is in your pain in the hip joint is due to the spine or due to the hip itself. Now, you let's talk about first back pain. Now, usually it can manifest in the as aching in your lower spine or your lower back or your lumbar spine, and it can radiate down from the lower back into the buttocks and the legs. It can reach into the knee and down into the feet as well. So what's happening here is you have your back pain, you have all these structures in your lumbar spine, and then there are these nerves that are coming down like well, they are sort of, that's the anatomy, so they originate from the sides. Well, they originates the nerve, not originates, but the nerve comes out from in between these little foramens or holes that are present on either side of the spine, and then they go down and they go around the bottom and down into your leg and in all the way to your feet. Of course, there's more than one nerve, but that's basically the gist of it, and that is happening all the way from your cervical spine to down into the lower lumbar spine. Of course, if you want to find out more about nerves and how nerve pain happens, you can have a look at my YouTube channel, or you can go type my name, Swati Prakash, nerve pain, and then you'll get a lot of those videos. But in general, I just wanted to point out before we started really that, well, we've already started, but before we get into the 3 points, that this is how lower back issues can manifest in the hip as a pain. So there is no problem in the hip, but it's actually coming from your lower back, but you feel it's in the hip joint. All right. So back pain will, I'll just repeat this 1 point again because I just did half of it and went off on a rabbit trail. So usually back pain will manifest as pain in your lumbar spine. It can go down as a nerve pain into your bottom, into the legs, up to the knees, or down into your feet till your toes. But when you have hip pain, I'm just looking in my notes while I'm talking to you. So when you have hip pain, so the problem is originating in your hip joint, usually you will feel it in the joint itself. Now, when you say hip, let me just clarify this. Some people refer to their gluteal or your buttock or bottom muscles as the hip as well. Yes, they're very closely related to your hip joint, but your hip joint is, if you look at the seam of the trousers that you're wearing, if you wear trousers, there's a stitch on this either side of your leg. So the top part there, that is your hip joint. If you don't know the exact location, what you can do is with your leg, just rotate. Keep your leg straight at the knee and then rotate your toes to face in or out. And then you will feel something moving on the side of your thigh, right on the top where your thigh starts. That itself is the hip joint. That is where the bone of the thigh attaches into the pelvis. So that is your hip joint. Now, the pain is felt typically in that hip joint. It can go to the bottom as well, or the front or the inner part of the thigh, but usually it will not cross the knee. It can, there is no hard and fast rule, but usually it'll be restricted to up to the knee, right? Or maybe just under the knee, but it will not go all the way down to your toes. This, obviously, the exceptions to the rule, but this is the general things that we see with the hip joint issues. Now, the second one is the nature of your pain. Now, hip joint pain, usually in the acute condition, that is when it has just started, it will be a sharp stabbing pain. But in the chronic or subacute stage, that is when you've had it for a while, it can also manifest as a dull, achy pain. Now, you might say, okay, it has to be either sharpshooting or dull achy. What is the rocket science in this, right? So, hear me out. When you move the hip joint, this pain gets aggravated, especially if it is due to arthritis or an injury. Say you had a fall on your hip, say you've got those clicks or those crepitus or the click, click, click sound when you're moving your hip joint around, or when you're walking or kicking or side kicking, you hear these crepitus or these sounds. So, especially with that movement, you will hear those sounds, right? So you might have stiffness in your hip. You will feel it more to start off with. You might just feel it on certain activities, but as your hip problem goes on, it becomes more chronic. You will feel it more 24/7. So initially you might just feel it when you're getting up from your sitting, or when you've been in a prolonged, well, you've been standing for a long time and you start to walk, you will feel the stiffness. But later it might be for longer durations as the problem multiplies. Now, you might notice it when you're climbing stairs or when you've been walking for a long period of time. So, this is for the pain, not the stiffness. So, you might feel the pain in the hip when you're climbing stairs, when you've been walking for a long period of time, or when you get up after prolonged sitting. So, this is for the hip joint. But when you have a back pain, so your hip problem is because of problems in your back, it tends to be a broad, radiating kind of a ache, and is often accompanied by back stiffness or a tingling numbness kind of a feeling, or weakness in your legs. So, do you see how this is different? So, it's not located right at your hip joint, and it's not coming into your bottoms only. It is across the back. It is usually felt with back stiffness, usually felt with tingling numbness or a nerve pain down into your legs. It can also manifest as a weakness. So nerve pain can be felt like a weakness or a dull, achy pain. So, usually back pain will get aggravated with activities like bending, lifting, or even standing or sitting for a long period of time. So you see the difference with the hip problems. It'll be more when you're in a static position and you start to move, or you're climbing stairs. With the back problem, you will have it more when you're bending, lifting, standing for extended period of time, sitting for extended period of time. You will have that back pain, and then that back pain will move into your hip joint. All right. So, as I said, with the hip joint, activities that involve your hip joint, such as going up the stairs, jogging, sitting in low seated chair, this is one of the differentiating signs. When you're sitting in a low seated chair, so when you have those floor seating, or those couches that really sink to the floor when sink down when you sit in them, that would aggravate your hip problem. Because why that happens is because okay, there was something funny on my Instagram videos. It's like a thought cloud over there. Anyway, ignore it. So what happens when you're sitting in low seated couches? You are lowering yourself down. Obviously, your quads, your hams, your, I mean, or the whole leg muscle chains are working, but more so the extensors. So extensors are like the back of the leg and the thigh and the bottom, right? So these are working to lower you down onto the chair, and when you expect it to be a certain level, you sit on it and then it sinks further. That aggravates your hip pain. So notice what actually aggravates your hip problem. So but when you look at the back pains, it may worsen or improve when changing movements. Now, for example, if I have a disc issue, generally with a disc problem, depends on the direction of your disc herniation, but usually with a disc problem, when you bend forwards, your pain aggravates. When you bend backwards or you straighten up, usually the pain decreases. So it is very much related to change of positions. And activities that strain the spine, such as lifting heavy objects, or say you're carrying your child, and obviously the child moves around, it's not a static weight, that can aggravate your back pain. And usually rest will relieve it. So, with the hip pain, of course, activities when you're avoiding low seating chairs, or when you are going up the steps or you're jogging, you stop those activities, can also relieve the symptoms. But do you see there's a slight difference in the kind of symptoms that happen with the hip joint involvement and with the back pain that manifests as a hip problem? So when I said back pain, I was basically talking about back pain that can manifest as a hip problem. Now, these were the main ones that I wanted to talk about, the main differentiating signs. Of course, there's some more. So, also, if you want to learn more about how to manage your back problems, how to manage your spinal or your nerve pain, you can join my free community. I will leave a link in the description, or rather, I'll leave a link in the description to a blog, and that blog has got a link to my community. Of course, if you can't find it, you can always message me, especially if you're in Instagram and you can't find it in my bio. I have Just send me a message and I will send the link to you. Okay, so that is all I wanted to cover in this video, but there are a couple more points that I'll put in the blog as well, so you can have a look at that blog. If you have any questions, any comments for me, do let me know. Actually, before I head off, I had one more point that I wanted to tell you. I hadn't thought of it initially, but I'll just add it here. Another thing that tells you whether your hip pain is originating in your lumbar spine or in the hip joint itself is when you do activities that aggravate your back pain, and that aggravates the pain in your hip joint. Of course, that means your lumbar pain and or your lumbar activity is related to your hip pain. Of course, that's common sense, right? But just pointing it out there, because sometimes when we are in pain, we don't relate the two together, right? And if you have done, say, walking, running, going up the steps, your hip pain has aggravated, but your back seems absolutely all right. There's no tingling, numbness, no nervy kind of pain in your legs, or you don't have any stiffness in your back at all, then probably it's just a problem in your hip joint. If you have both back issues and hip issues and they influence each other, you probably might have one leading to the other, right? So obviously that's where your doctor comes in to help you differentiate. And if you need more clarification, I can always have a chat with you. So that was one thing that I wanted to add in. Now, this obviously is not in the blog, so this is a bonus point for you. All right, I'll see you guys next time. If you have any questions, any comments, do let me know and I'll be happy to help you out. Bye for now.